I want to welcome everybody. We have an interesting guest speaker today, as well as an interesting interviewer. Robin Foy has been involved in physical mediumship for many years and has quite a reputation. You'll hear more about that. I have to admit that while I'm well versed in a lot of subjects, physical mediumship is not one of them. So I'm looking forward to today and getting a chance to listen to you talk about it. If the two of you would remember that many of us, you need to start from a pretty basic level just to get us going. I'm going to mute everybody at this point, except I will unmute Mark and Robin. Let's see. So Robin, you need to unmute yours as well. We have a chat capacity. If you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. After the formal presentation, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. You can personally ask questions if you like. If you type them in, I will be moderating the question and answer section. I'm guessing we might have 45 minutes to an hour of formal conversation between Mark and Robin, and then we'll move into a question and answer time period. This is being recorded. You can find this when we're all done. We'll be posting it on our YouTube channel. So if you have to drop out, or if you really like what you're hearing and you want to share it with somebody else, please pass the word around. This is an important subject. Robin is, you're going to hear, is engaged in some interesting work to try to promote physical mediumship. So having said all that, Mark, I'll turn it over to you and Robin. And thank you, Robin, for being here. Robin, by the way, is in Spain right now, hence our reason for doing it at this time of day.
Yeah. And Robin, welcome. I'm honored to be able to interview you and to let people in the U.S. know about the work that you've done over the past 40 years in Europe. You're currently living where in Spain?
We're currently on the Costa Blanca, which is sort of about midway down the east coast of Spain, and we will be moving on the 2nd of July to Antequera, which is actually pretty close to the Costa del Sol. If you go down the coast as far as Malaga and then turn inland, which is proper Costa del Sol, 260 miles south of us, then 25 miles in from the coast is Antequera, where we will be living.
Wow. And before that, you lived in the United Kingdom.
We did indeed, yes. We moved out here to Spain 14 and a half years ago.
Wow. And during that time in the United Kingdom, you were heavily involved in physical mediumship, and we'll talk about what that means here in a second. But
absolutely.
The really most famous achievement that you and your wife Sandra and Alan and Diana Bennett did in the 1990s was what's been termed the Scole Experiment. But it was a series of physical mediumship sittings that happened in your house in Scole.
Absolutely. Yeah, we lived in that house at Scole for 15 years. It was probably the happiest period of our lives, and we've sort of come to a stage now where we're ready to start what you might call our swan song. So this project that we're about to start will probably be the last one that we do, but we really want to sort of get this very, very special center in Antequera in Andalusia in Spain up and running, so that physical mediumship can be demonstrated. But we are specializing here in this center in the scientific aspect of it all, rather than just straightforward religion, because people generally regard anything to do with spirituality as being a religion of spiritualism. And we have never been part of spiritualism. We have always been psychic researchers looking very much into the pros and cons of physical mediumship, which we have now been doing for 48 years. And currently, we are running an organization called the Spiritual Science Founders Association, which will be the people who are sort of in charge of the center. I'm the president of that at the moment. And if anybody wants to find out more about our organization, the website is www.ssf-robin-foy.com. And you'll find a lot of information about us on there. To belong to our association costs only €20 a year. And you will see on the website exactly, you can join from the website, exactly how to join the organization.
Yeah. And Robin, you have an event coming up at the end of July, is that correct?
Yeah, that's quite correct. I mean, this is going to be the first proper event that we hold in the centre. Things are a little bit difficult at the moment because we still have over here in Spain and really all over Europe and the world restrictions because of the COVID situation. And it's very, very difficult still to travel from county to county in Spain, and the same in the UK and various other places here. So we're starting off with an event which is going to be a seminar on the internet, a Zoom seminar on the internet on the 31st of July, which will be at the same time as this particular meeting. It'll be at 7 o'clock, sort of Central European time, which is 6 o'clock in the UK, and virtually the same time as this meeting now that you are listening to, which is sort of 10 a.m. Western side in the USA, or 1 p.m. Eastern side in the USA. And the seminar will be all about how to start a circle, how to develop your own phenomena. And we're really coming to this from a lot of knowledge that we've gained in the 48 years that we've been involved in this research. And we have been lucky enough in that time to have some marvelous phenomena, which in the 1990s was actually heralded as being the nearest thing for many, many years to absolute proof of life after death. And we achieved some amazing phenomena, which was being done in a brand new way that hadn't been used by physical mediumship previously. And it allowed us to get more phenomena and more possibilities of proving life after death.
That's great. And speaking of your online session, I wanted to mention a couple other sources of information for people in the United States to learn more about Robin and Sandra and their work and the story of the Scole Experiment. There's a 1-hour video on YouTube called The Afterlife Investigations. That was a documentary that was done in the early 2010s, I believe, that talks about the Scole Experiment and physical mediumship and some of the things that they were able to achieve. Also, too, Robin, you appeared just a few weeks ago on Dr. Jeffrey Mishlov's New Thinking Aloud interviews on YouTube.
Yeah, I did indeed, yes.
And he's been doing these for decades. He was the first and maybe the only person to get a PhD in parapsychology in the United States. And
Fantastic.
one of the things that he's done with that is he's interviewed luminaries in parapsychology and the psychic world for decades. And he has an incredible set of information, just video clips of people for years and years talking about the different aspects of the paranormal. So for the people on the call, I would encourage you to listen to Dr. Jeffrey Mishlov's interview of Robin as well, and get a hold of the Afterlife Investigations on YouTube. We can talk some more about some of the books that have been written about the Scole Experiment as well, but we'll cover that at the end. I just wanted to give people a quick hit of how they could get to information about you. But the big question, and as Jim Fisher alluded to up at the start, is what is physical mediumship? And we all are used to mental mediumship, where people act, or mediums act as intermediaries between a person who's wanting to speak to someone on the other side and people who are over there. But what is physical mediumship, and how does it differ from mental mediumship, Robin?
Okay, well, mental mediumship is a medium, and usually mental mediumship takes place in fully lighted conditions. What you have to remember is that it's only the medium that's able to hear spirit voices, and that's known as clairaudience, to see spirit people, which is known as clairvoyance, and to feel spirit people, which is known as clairsentience. Now, the spirit people that actually speak or show themselves or sensibly or give their sensitive aspect to the clairsentience are able to give them messages, and then the mediums there relay these messages on to the people who are sitting with them, who are with them, an audience or a face-to-face interview. But the person who is there is not able to see, hear, or be involved in any direct contact with spirit. That's known as mental mediumship, because it's done through the medium's mentality and not in a physical way. Physical mediumship is totally different, and it has the potential to really, really prove the reality of life after death. Because where physical mediumship is taking place, everybody who is present is able to be involved, so that any voices that are heard coming from midair or what have you, they're spirit voices, and everybody in the room will hear them. Sometimes when a physical medium is present, these voices can be heard at the same time that the physical medium is talking, where the real top priority, so sort of with physical mediumship, is to have a solid spirit person actually in the room with them. And of course, when this happens, everybody in the room can speak to the spirit person, can interact with the spirit person, and of course, if they have their own relatives present, somebody that's passed on, a father, a mother, a wife, a husband, children, they would speak in their own voices as you would remember them on Earth, and they would directly give an awful lot of evidence of their continued existence by speaking about things that only the people present would know about, and in a direct way, as they are speaking to their own relatives, and there are an awful lot of sort of work has been done in we did at Scole to do also with films, and we had a tremendous amount of spirit lights that did all different things. I mean, our spirit team at Scole developed, for instance, a very small light that would actually be seen by everybody present, but would enter the bodies of people who were there and give them healing. I specifically remember the case of a lady when we were demonstrating this phenomena in San Francisco. That was Los Angeles. And this lady had had very, very bad knees and had pain in her knees for 10 years or so and couldn't walk properly. She came to us, and during the first session she had, this little spirit light appeared and went into one of her knees. After the session, when she went home, she no longer had any pain whatsoever in that knee, so much so that she came back within a week for a second session, and the little light actually went into her other knee, and gave her total healing in her knees. And to this day, I mean, this was in 1997. And to this day, this lady is now existing perfectly happily, no problems at all with her knees. So this was a really wonderful thing that Spirit developed during the Scole group. And it was something we hadn't come across before in any other group that was sitting for physical phenomena.
So, Robin, you talked about direct voice, or voices coming not only from the medium, but from space. You also heard singing as well. So people have sung to you in these sessions?
They certainly have, and not only sung to us, but played music in these sessions. Literally, there were 3 or 4 occasions when we had a whole band that was played around us on musical instruments that were there in the room, 6 or 7 musical instruments playing at the same time. And there was a spirit drummer who was actually playing 2 drum sets at the same time. I mean, that was quite amazing.
That's great. And you talked about the voices, but also you've had the manifestation of items and objects. And then in some cases, people can appear too, or discarnate hands or arms, but actually even the entire person in some cases, I believe.
Well, that's absolutely true. And I mean, there have been occasions at Scole when we had up to 8 spirit people in the room all at the same time. And these people were able to touch us, to interact with us. They were quite solid there at the time. There is a difference between the way that this happened when we were doing it, when we were experimenting, and the way that this happens when a medium is using a substance called ectoplasm. That's what you would call the traditional way of working for materialization or for spirit people to actually appear in front of everybody. But with us, it was working in a totally different way that was pioneered by the spirit team working with us. Mm-hmm. And they used only energy, a mixture of 3 different types of energy to achieve the phenomena that they were doing with us. The ectoplasmic phenomena means virtually always that the physical medium who is present is in a deep trance whilst ectoplasm is being exuded from their body. Ectoplasm can come from any or all of their orifices, their natural orifices, their mouth, their ears, their eyes, even their rectum. This ectoplasm builds into a substance which has been described in the past as cheesecloth, and it's nothing like it, actually. I've witnessed an awful lot of ectoplasm over the years. This can build up into a spirit person who appears to be quite solid, usually with white spirit robes around them. That's how that happens. And usually when this is working, the medium concerned with ectoplasm sits in a cabinet, which is like a little Punch and Judy show sort of tent, if you like, where they're able to build up the energies and extract the ectoplasm from the medium. The curtains will then sort of move aside, and the spirit person will move out into the light so that everybody in the room can see them. I've seen this happen with several physical mediums. I mean, during our lifetimes, we've sat with about 20 really good physical mediums, and we've seen this materialization process on a number of occasions. Where we were working and where the solid people were in our room, solid spirit people in our room, what was happening was that they were teleported into the room from the spirit world, exactly in their normal spiritual essence, if you like, so in their spirit personality. But they then gathered creative energy, which is a mix of 3 different types of energy, from a glass dome where it was stored in the room. By mentally, these spirit people were able to increase the density of their bodies so that they became totally solid, or part of them such as a hand or arm, became totally solid, or sort of even just a face or what have you. But because of the fact it was done in a different way, there are three different types of energy that go into this creative energy. The first of these is spiritual energy that's brought from the spirit world by the spirit team who are working with us. The second is the spiritual energy of the sitters who are around you in the circle. And the third type of energy is natural earth energy, which exists in certain geographical locations on this earth in a spiral or a column. And this, when these three things are mixed together, they form this creative energy that the spirit team can then use to actually teleport solid spirit people into the room, so that again they can be interacted with. And there have been many occasions when our spirit team have said to sitters, people that were present, that if they were touched, they could feel back. And many of them did so. And it was noted by all of the sitters that when they felt a spirit hand and moved sort of up the arm of that spirit person, they came into contact with a shirt and a jacket just normally as they would have worn in their lifetime. So they don't appear in white spirit robes as they often did in the past with ectoplasm, and as they often still do when ectoplasm is used. So it's a totally different system altogether, but it was one that was pioneered by the spirit team at Scole and is now widely used throughout the world by many people who are developing physical phenomena for themselves.
And one of the benefits of using energy as opposed to ectoplasm is that it's less dangerous for the mediums, I believe.
It is absolutely, there is absolutely no problem whatsoever for the mediums. If somebody did something stupid in the room, all that would happen is that the phenomena would stop. And it's likely that later on the spirit team would actually tell everybody what had happened and why it had to stop. But if a medium is in deep trance and has ectoplasm exuding from his body or her body, and somebody does something stupid like throwing on an electric light or grabbing the spirit person, the actual ectoplasm shoots back into the body of the medium and can cause an awful lot of damage and sometimes death when it happens. There were very, very famous spirit medium, materialization medium, Helen Duncan in the UK. She was actually killed by this when the police broke into a seance she was holding in Nottingham. The ectoplasm shot back into her body at tremendous speed, and within a week or so, she died. So we've known cases of this. So it's much easier for people to work with, and you can sit there in confidence knowing that nobody's going to be harmed in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. In this session with the Consciousness Cafe is to talk about the work with energy in physical mediumship, because it's less dangerous for the medium, and I believe it produces results quicker than if you were using ectoplasm for physical mediumship. But it just seems to be safer all the way around.
Yeah, I mean the thing is that you can start any circle that's sitting in a serious way to develop phenomena. Can actually develop their first phenomena within weeks or even months, whereas a physical medium sitting with ectoplasm can take years to really get any phenomena at all. And I have known cases of mediums who've sat for physical materialization, etc., who have sat for 12 years and got absolutely nothing. But I mean, this takes an awful lot of dedication to go every week to a circle to sit for this type of phenomena. And of course, once you've got it, then you've got this danger that goes with it. So you've got to be so careful also in conditions when people are sitting with ectoplasm present.
Yeah. But let's talk about some of the materializations that occurred at Scole, because when I was reading the books about the work that you had done, some of these things that happened were just so convincing and so hard to explain by natural means. That was
Absolutely.
one of the things that really astounded me. And you talked about Helen Duncan earlier.
Yeah.
There was a newspaper that appeared in one of your sittings from World War II, from London.
Yes, yeah, it was. I mean, the date in the newspaper was 1944, and Helen Duncan was arrested and thrown into prison around about, I think it was about January or February of 1944. The reason that this happened basically was not because she was a fraudulent medium, but because she had held some seances in Plymouth and on the south coast of the UK, where the Navy were holding manoeuvres and where a lot of them were based. And sailors who had been killed on ships that had been sunk. And at the time, the news of the sinking had not got out to the public. The government didn't want news of the sinking to get out to the public. But sailors had actually appeared. And one case, there was a sailor greeted his mother. And he was from HMS Barham, which had been sunk. Of course, somebody heard about this in the government, and it was stopped because they actually put her into prison. And the only way that they could really get a proper conviction was to actually sort of legally use the Witchcraft Act. And I think that was the last time that the Witchcraft Act was ever used in the UK. But the reason that it happened was that, as you know, in 1944, in June 1944, there were the D-Day landings, and preparation was actually well underway the previous year and during January, February in 1944 for these D-Day landings. And of course, nobody wanted this information to get out to the enemy. So unfortunately, Helen Duncan's mediumship was suppressed and she had to do a stint in prison for 6 months. But of course, by the time that she came out of prison and continued with her work, the D-Day landings had taken place. So, there was no more worry from that point of view.
So let's talk about the evidence for the newspaper. In terms of the paper type and the printing and stuff. It was really hard for someone to explain away to say that it was fraudulent or fake or a hoax.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when this newspaper appeared, and we'd had 2 or 3 of these actually during our sittings. Another one was a 1945 newspaper that was talking about Winston Churchill, having lost the election in 1945 after the war. But this particular one, it was newsprint that arrived, and it's very, very poor quality paper that was used during the wartime. And they weren't able to use paper or pulp that had been chemically treated at that time because it wasn't available. And all they could do was basically to take tree trunks and sort of grind them all up to make into pulp to create this poor quality paper. When you received a newspaper in those days, it was usually pristine, it's lovely and sort of white or cream. Within days of receiving it and leaving it in a room, in the light, in the air, it would go brown. And the reason for that was that in the pulp was a substance called lignin, which occurs naturally in trees, but which, if you're making pulp for decent quality paper, is not there because it's been chemically treated. And so this lignin makes the thing go sort of a very, very dark color within hours, really, of it being received. And when we received this newspaper, it was apported. That's the term for little presents from spirit. They were apports, and this newspaper was in pristine condition, just as though it had come straight off the press. But we actually put it in an airtight container and kept it away from the light. But within 2 or 3 days, it had gone brown, just like other paper of that era. But a piece of this paper was actually taken by the SPR, that's the Society for Psychical Research in the UK, and sent to an organization called PIRA, which is the Paper Industry Research Association. They were able to confirm that the makeup of the pulp that had gone into that paper was actually definitely wartime. And they were able to say definitely that it had been made, the paper had been made in the same year as it had been used in 1944. I mean, that was actually a scientific result that couldn't be a sort of in any way fraudulent.
So let's talk a little bit about the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research from London. You had 3 investigators who were scientists and senior members of the SPR who attended, I believe it was over 30 of your sittings. And I don't know how many hours that would equate to, but that was in 1996 to 1997. And then they wrote like a 200-page report on Scole. And I think this is kind of what set you apart from other people, is that you had people scientifically testing you for hoaxing or fakery or trickery or whatever, and they couldn't find anything.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, you said around about 30 sittings equates to around about sort of 60 hours of sitting and 60 hours of phenomena. And that was all over the world, because when we were doing demonstrations in California, one of those 3 scientists, Monty Keene, actually came out with us and sat in on several of our sittings. There was one demonstration that was actually in San Francisco, or just across the Golden Gate Bridge, and he went to the ends of the earth to make sure we knew nothing about the people who was going to be present. We didn't know their names. We didn't even know where the meeting was going to be till a couple of hours beforehand. And it was a very, very difficult road to navigate to get there. When we arrived at the house, we were just told, go down to the gymnasium, which was in the house. It's been blacked out, ready for the sittings. We weren't actually, sort of given any information about the people or what have you. And we didn't know until afterwards that several of the sitters had actually come from NASA and various other organizations that were close by. That was a very, very successful demonstration. So Monty Keene was one there, and the other 2 guys, and they sat with us many, many times, well, say 30 times, and over all those times, there was never any evidence whatsoever of fraud. In fact, we all used to wear a luminous wristband, which made sure that we could be seen at all times, and as we moved our arms and so forth, we could be seen. And also the table, a round table that we used at Scole, was specially constructed so that there was a crisscross underneath the table, a solid crisscross of sort of panels under there, so that nobody could actually move under the table or around the area. We even brought in a wind detector that told us there were psychic breezes, and it was done in such a scientific way, as much as the spirit team would allow, because we always worked within the confines of what the spirit team wanted, and it was so important to them and to the 3 SPR guys and to us that we made it as security minded as possible. And everybody was happy at the end that, they'd witnessed absolute phenomena.
Well, it was great. I do want to mention for the people listening to this session that there's a book that the SPR produced. It's called the Scole Report. And it is a copy of the proceedings that were published in the SPR's journal in 1999. But this book came out in 2011, and it's available on Amazon. So you can actually read what the investigators reported. You can read what some of the people who refused to believe it said, and then you could read what the referee said at the end, who was adjudicating this. But it's a very fascinating read, and it talks about a lot of the different things that were unexplainable that were produced at Scole. One of the things that, Robin, if you could elaborate on a little bit more is the films. And there were a lot of films that had writing on them, drawings on them, poems written on them that couldn't be explained by any natural way, even to the extent that people would try and explain how someone could fraudulently write something that was 100 years old. But they actually had some scientifically controlled instances where people would come in with canisters of film. They would lock it in a lockbox. They would hold the lockbox, and then they would develop it after the session was over. So they were in total control, and it would still come up with stuff. So could you talk about some of those? Because there were some really incredible things that happened with film.
Yeah, they really were. I mean, there were so many different phases, though, of the film work. I mean, the first one was in the fairly early days, when we hadn't been sitting too long. I mean, we probably about a year, and one of the sitters wanted to take photographs in there to see if they could get anything, on the film. And they asked the spirit team, could we bring in a camera? And the spirit team said yes. So we brought in a normal 35mm camera, our own, that was actually loaded just before the session. And I took a picture of the outside of Scole from our library window, especially so we could identify it just in case there was anything weird on there. And during the course of that first sitting, Sandra was asked if she would pick up the camera and point it into the center of the room, everything in total darkness. So there shouldn't have been anything at all on the film. There was no lighting whatsoever. And when she was pointing it at the center, whenever they said now, she was to take a picture with a camera, which she did. And I suppose there must have been about 5 or 6 pictures taken in this way. And then she put the camera down on the seat next to her, which was empty. And shortly afterwards, we heard the camera being levitated, being moved around the room, and continuing to take pictures by itself. And when we developed this film at the end, if it hadn't have been for the picture at the beginning that actually showed the garden in Scole, we wouldn't have believed it was our film. There were 11 different pictures on there, 11 frames, all with different pictures from all over the world. And we were told, actually, in the early days, that these were copies of existing pictures that existed somewhere in the world. I mean, that was quite amazing. We were getting all sorts of things on there, faces of different people, and even wedding ceremonies with different people, none of which we identified. But I think a week or so later, Spirit Team allowed a second camera to be brought in there as well. And when that happened, both the cameras were sort of sitting on another surface somewhere. Both of them were levitated and moved around the room and taking their own photographs. And when those films were developed, again, each film had 11 frames on it of pictures all over the place, all over the world. And some of them were of well-known people within spiritualism. It was quite amazing. But we wondered how we could take this film work further. And so we started to experiment with flat Polaroid films, which we would take out of the cassette, the Polaroid cassette, and place on the table during sittings. And then after the sitting, we couldn't actually turn the light on. So we had to sort out a way to get these films back into the cassette, so they could then be put through the Polaroid instant camera with its lens blacked out and produce a result. And we started to get some very interesting pictures of energy on these films. Well, we took those down to Polaroid, the Polaroid organization in London, and the lady who ran the newspaper for Polaroid, in-house newspaper, was so interested by this that she gave us a complete stock of flat Polaroid films, of 35mm Polaroid films, which at that time were very, very expensive. They were costing a 36 shot film was costing somewhere in the region of £30, 30 English pounds at that time. Well, we couldn't afford to maintain many experiments with those, but she gave us a whole stock of these, plus an actual device that was able to develop the film after we'd used it. And this worked over a period of time until we were asked to start putting films on the table that hadn't been taken out of their shop wrapping. And it was on these films we started to get some very, very interesting results, because they would use the whole film. And as you said, they were in a locked box so that nobody could tamper with them during the session. But when the film was, well, we had to make a special arrangement for the film to be developed by an organization in the UK. I think Kodak did it for us. And films were up to 4 feet in length, the complete length of the film. And there were really, really amazing things that were on there. And eventually, it was that method that was used by Thomas Edison, to bring us a blueprint for a little device, which became known as the TDC device, the Trans-Dimensional Communication Device, with which, after the Spirit team had worked with it for several months, we started to get actual voice communication, not just with the spirit world, but with other dimensions. So we're talking ETs as well. And the first person to speak through that device himself was Thomas Edison, who spoke for about 15 minutes.
And this was done without a medium too. Was that the significance of
this
that?
was done without a medium. In fact, the TDC device, very small device, was simply plugged into an amplifier on a tape recorder, so that we could hear what was being said and record it. And they also worked another system so that they could speak to us through the amplifier of a cassette tape recorder. And this was a separate way, so that just with the tape recorder which had played our music, they would suddenly come on there and start talking to us. And many of the voices that spoke through that cassette tape recorder amplifier were identified by sitters as their relatives.
Yeah. And just to make sure that there wasn't any fraud, I believe the microphone was removed from those devices as well.
It was indeed, yes.
So it's very interesting. Now, you also had some experience with doing videos in the sittings, the Alice Project.
Yes, we did. I mean, that came towards the end of the Scole Experiment, and it took an awful long time, really, to start getting results on video. The Spirit team kept telling us how they wanted us to place the video recorder so that it was facing into 2 mirrors, and they created a loop between the front of the video recorder and the 2 mirrors and the viewer on the recorder. So that took nearly a year for them to really start getting results with that. But when we did, we were getting some amazing things. I mean, for instance, there was actually photographs or video photographs of a little ET called Blue. We called him Blue because he was blue on the video and he was animated on the video. And this little ET actually came and visited us on 3 occasions then, and has since been teleported into sittings we've had here in Spain. He was a loving little guy. I mean, no more than about sort of 4'2", 4'3" tall. And he came and stood in front of all of us there, picked up our hands, put them on his head and his face so we could feel that he wasn't human. But the love that came from that little guy was amazing. You could feel it like a wall. And it was so fantastic.
So these were just incredible instances that were written in the books and the videos that describe the work that happened at the Scole Experiment. And Robin, I believe you've written a book that actually details everything that happened in all the different sessions.
Yeah, it's the only book in the world actually that has a complete report of every sitting of the Scole Experiment. It's called Witnessing the Impossible. And to actually get it, if anybody does want a copy, they really need to email me for the information on the email scoleexperiment@yahoo.co.uk, and I'll send them all the pricing because it varies from where they are in the world. It's a very heavy book, and so the airmail postage is very expensive, but nevertheless it is available. I've got a lot of copies there actually, which are sent from the UK. We don't have them with us in Spain, so I can't autograph them here. But if anybody buys a copy and then wants to come down to our centre in Antequera, I'd be very happy to autograph them there for them.
That's great. And you also have a PDF that people can actually get sent through the mail that is the basics on physical mediumship.
We do indeed, yes. It's known just as the basic guidebook, and it is available. It's just €10 if anybody wants it, and that would be sent through PayPal to. But you can see about that if you go onto the website of the association.
Well, let's talk about the association now, because this is you were talking about your swan song. I would like to call it your encore career. This is it, because the spirit team told you after Scole that this was going to produce events and evidence that was going to be more significant than the things that we talked about at Scole. So it sounds like there's going to be some really, I would say, almost historic things that could happen or could come out of what you're getting ready to embark on.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, we've been led to believe that what will happen in the future is that spirit people will be able to be there in the light, to be seen, and to be able to actually talk with anybody that participates in this. But they will be instantly able to be recognized as themselves. And the interesting factor is that we've had an awful lot of interaction during our sittings here in Scole. We sat for several years over here with ex-presidents of the USA. So we believe that probably some of these people may well be ex-presidents of the USA. Wow. We know that Churchill will probably be there as well.
Yeah, he's appeared quite a few times, I believe, for you.
He's been working with us right from the very first time that we got involved in this this research 48 years ago.
Wow. I was reading through the basic guide, and it was talking about the new Spiritual Science Foundation, which is now the Spiritual Science Founders Association. But there was a quote in there that was talking about the objective of the group. And it's on page 11 of the basic guide, but it says the aim of the new Spiritual Science Foundation, now the Spiritual Science Founders Association, through the practical work and phenomenon of such experimental groups, not only to bring to the attention of the general public a mass of irrefutable proof of the survival of human spirit after death, but to engage or to enable a permanent bridge to be created between the two, physical and spiritual worlds, so that communications between them can become a normal, natural, and each and everyday event for each and every one of us in both worlds. And that was really astonishing, that, you know, one of the things that may come out of this is a permanent bridge between dimensions.
Yeah, I that's absolutely right. We're quite convinced that that will happen. It might take a few years to do it, and we probably won't be here ourselves when it comes to fruition. But nevertheless, I'm absolutely certain that one of the things that's kicked that off is this COVID situation, because the whole world has changed its attitude towards lots of different things during this period. And the interest in psychic work, psychic research, etc., has grown dramatically since people were locked down with this COVID business.
Wow. Well, I think there's going to be a lot of exciting things going on once you get this started. And you were actually told what building or what city you were going to actually have this facility in.
Yeah, we were indeed. I mean, when we first moved over here to Spain, it was in 2006, and we hadn't sat for a long time with Scole, which finished in 1998. But in 2007, we had a couple of physical mediums from Glasgow in Scotland over here, called the Andersons, Tom and Linda Anderson, and they stayed with us here in Spain, and we had 3 sittings in the week that they stayed with us here, and then a couple of months later, we met them in France and shared a gîte with them there. We had a couple more sittings, but during those sittings, their spirit team and ours, by the way, because before this, we hadn't had any communication with our own spirit team for many years. But all of our spirit team actually spoke in independent voice to us during those 5 sittings. And we were told that we had to start this center in a place in Spain. And they wouldn't tell us even the name of the town, other than the fact that its name began with an A. We were given 25 clues as to where this town was going to be. I did the research afterwards, and the only place in the whole of Spain that it could have been was a place in Andalusia called Antequera. And ever since then, I mean, this has been confirmed so many times by Spirit that is the definite place that they wanted us to go. And of course, I think it must have been April when we had a sitting, or had 2 sittings in France with the Andersons. And we had already decided to sort of go and have a look at Antequera. We booked to go down there. I think it was in July. It was exceedingly hot, I remember. And it's a drive of 260 miles, so it was a long drive. We were quite tired when we got there and really wanted some food. We were driving along on the road from Antequera to a place called the Torcal, which is a mountain, almost a sacred mountain in the Spanish area around Antequera. And as we drove along, we're looking for food, but there was a restaurant along the road. I mean, it's about 5-6 miles between Antequera and the Torcal, and about halfway along, sort of 3 kilometers out of Antequera, there was a restaurant. We pulled up at this restaurant, and then unfortunately, as we got out of the car, we saw it was closed. But there was an old guy sort of put his head out of the window and said, no, come on in, I'll cook you a meal. Well, prior to going there, we'd been back to the UK, and Sandra had managed to get a sitting with a very evidential mental medium who's put her in contact with her mother. And Sandra's mum said about this Antequera, she confirmed that it was Antequera where this was all going to happen. And she said, watch out for the goats with the bells. And at the time, I thought, well, it's very nice, but it didn't really mean anything to us. But as we went to this restaurant, had a meal, I was sitting with my back to the window. Sandra was sitting facing the window. All of a sudden, she shouted out, "Oh, my God." And I shot round, And down the hill outside the restaurant were hundreds of goats with bells on coming down the hill. Now, we should have taken that immediately to realize that's what spirit were trying to tell us. But it was only 5 years ago that we actually came to realize that was, in fact, the premises that we needed to take. In the interim period, we've been going backwards and forwards to Antiquera, learning about the place, looking for possible centres. But it was about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when I had a reading with a very evidential medium called Sandy Ingham in the UK. And she's a very, very talented spirit artist. But Sandy also sort of told us to start this organisation, which is now the Spiritual Science Founders Association. Another friend of ours, who is a mental medium, said that you will recognise the property where you're going to have this centre when you see eagles flying overhead. Well, about 5 years ago, we happened to be driving along this same road, and on this restaurant was a banner in front saying for sale. So we pulled up and sort of thought, might be a possible place for us. And as we got out of the car, we looked up and there were 2 golden eagles flying overhead. So that settled it. And since then, we've had so many confirmations from many different mediums, from many different areas, as to the fact that that's the right place. But still, we didn't have the money to buy it. And unfortunately, although I tried very hard to fundraise for it, I couldn't get enough. But I did manage to get about 37,000 euros for this, sort of ready there. Well, we knew that this place had sold a year ago, and it was now on the market for 300,000 euros. So we managed to do a deal because of COVID, and this chap had a problem with his cash flow. We managed to do a deal so that we could rent the place to buy it in 2 years' time. So we're putting down 10% of the cost of 300,000 euros, and we're renting it for 1,200 euros a month. And in 2 years' time, we've now got to raise the rest of the money so that we can actually buy this centre. But it's going to be a very, very fantastic place when phenomena starts to happen there. And not only that, but our members and the public generally will actually be able to witness physical phenomena whilst we're running there.
I think that's great, Robin. And I look forward to hearing great things about this center that's open. I wanted to open up the floor for questions here in just a couple minutes. I hope this has inspired people to become interested in learning more about physical mediumship, to learn more about the Spiritual Science Founders Association, maybe even join their group. And also, too, is to consider even starting your own experimental group, your own physical mediumship group. You could look at that basic guide. And I think members can consult with you for support and information, Robin, if they have any questions.
Yeah, they certainly can. I mean, over the years, I've spent an awful lot of time giving advice and help to people. But because we now have so many members, I have to restrict it to the people that belong to the organization. But I'm still here to answer their questions and help.
That's great. Well, I'd like to open the questions with and close the interview with a quote from your spirit team. Is actually in one of the documents that I read, and it was information for the people who would be reading it. It says, "Have an open mind and an open heart. Changes in the thought and behavior patterns of individuals create changes in the conditions of humanity as a whole. We often hear you say, I cannot do anything about this or that problem because it's too far away or nothing to do with me. Well, know this, all things, whether tangible or intangible, and all events, whether of yesterday, today, or tomorrow, have everything to do with everyone. This is a fact of spiritual science that we are attempting to share with you. If enough individuals receive what we are now able to send and adopt a position of openness, harmony, and love in their interactions, untold wonders will then be available to all." And with that, I'd like to thank you, Robin, for your time. And again, it's been a pleasure and an honor to speak with you this evening.
You're very welcome.